I'm 77 years old, and I need to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. For 52 years of my life, I stayed in a marriage that was wrong from the start. I knew it on my wedding day. I knew it on our honeymoon. I knew it every single morning for 5 decades, and I stayed anyway. I was wrong about everything, not just wrong about love, wrong about duty, wrong about what makes a good person, wrong about sacrifice, wrong about what I owed the world. Something happened to me 3 years ago that changed everything. Something I should have let happen decades earlier. And now I'm sitting here in my little apartment with a cup of tea that's gone cold, wondering how many of you are making the same mistake I made, wondering how many of you are staying in marriages that drain you, staying in jobs that hollow you out, staying in lives that don't fit, staying because you think that's what good people do. Let me tell you something nobody told me when I was young. Staying isn't always noble. Sometimes staying is the coward's choice. Sometimes staying is just fear wearing a costume called commitment. I'm not here to tell you to blow up your life. I'm not here to give you permission to hurt people. But I am here to ask you a question that took me 52 years to finally answer honestly. Are you staying because you want to, or because you're afraid? If you're listening to this and something in your chest just tightened, keep listening. This story is for you. 3 years ago, my wife Margaret died. We'd been married for 52 years. We raised 2 children together. We buried her mother, then mine, then her father. We moved 4 times. We weathered job losses and health scares and all the ordinary catastrophes of an ordinary life. And when she died, I felt something I'm still ashamed to admit: relief. Not joy, not celebration, just this quiet, terrible relief. Like I'd been holding my breath underwater for half a century and someone finally pulled me to the surface. She was sick for 8 months before the end. Pancreatic cancer. The doctor said 6 months, but Margaret was stubborn, always had been. She fought for 2 extra months just to prove them wrong. I was at her bedside when she passed, held her hand, said all the things you're supposed to say. And then I went home to an empty house and I sat in my chair and I waited to feel devastated. The devastation never came. What came instead was worse. I started remembering. Not the good times. There were some, of course there were. We weren't monsters. We laughed sometimes. We were kind to each other in the way roommates are kind. No. I started remembering the woman I didn't marry. Her name was Ruth. I met Ruth in the summer of 1969. I was 23 years old, just finished with college, working my first real job at an insurance company in Cleveland. Ruth worked in the building next door. We met at a lunch counter. She had dark hair that curled at the ends and a laugh that made everyone in the room smile. She read books I'd never heard of and had opinions about everything. She challenged me, made me think, made me want to be better, smarter, more alive. I loved her. I loved her in a way that scared me, and that was the problem. See, I was already engaged to Margaret by then. We'd been together since high school. Our families knew each other. The wedding was planned. The church was booked. The invitations were printed. Margaret was safe. Margaret was expected. Margaret was what everyone wanted for me. Ruth was a wildfire. Ruth was uncertain. Ruth was the kind of love that makes you risk everything. I chose safe. I told myself it was the honorable thing to do. I told myself a good man keeps his promises. I told myself the feeling I had for Ruth would fade and the feeling I had for Margaret would grow. I was 23 years old, and I made the biggest mistake of my life. You want to know how I spent the next 52 years? Waiting. That's what I did. I waited. I told myself things would get better. I told myself this was just how marriage was. I told myself that love wasn't supposed to feel like movies and books. That was fantasy. This was real life. At 30, I thought, when we have kids, then we'll be closer. We had kids. We weren't closer. At 35, I thought when we get a bigger house, then we'll be happier. We got the house, we weren't happier. At 40, I thought when the kids are older and we have more time together, then things will change. The kids got older, nothing changed. So I waited again. At 50, I thought the passion would transform into something deeper. Companionship, partnership, the quiet comfort of two people who've built a life together. But you can't build something deep on a shallow foundation. What we had wasn't love, it was habit, it was convenience, it was two people who'd forgotten there was any other way to live. And the worst part, Margaret felt it too. She never said it directly, but I could see it in her eyes. That same quiet disappointment, that same resignation. We were both trapped and neither of us had the courage to say it out loud. So we performed our marriage like actors in a play that had run too long. I came home every night to a house that felt like a waiting room. I ate dinners where we talked about nothing that mattered. I slept beside someone I didn't know. Not really. Not in the ways that count. And every single day I wondered about Ruth. I never contacted her. I kept my promise. I was faithful in body, if not in heart. I was a good man by every measure that counts for nothing. But I thought about her at night when I couldn't sleep, on Sunday mornings reading the paper, in quiet moments that stretched into quiet years. I wondered if she'd married, if she was happy, if she ever thought about me. I wondered what my life would have been like if I'd been brave. Here's what I had: the stable marriage, the nice house in the suburbs, the two children who grew up thinking their parents loved each other, the respect of my community. Here's what I didn't have: passion, joy, the feeling that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, someone who truly knew me. I had everything that looks good on paper, and I had nothing that makes you feel alive. Let me tell you about the lies that kept me prisoner for 52 years. Maybe you're believing some of them right now. Lie number 1, a good person keeps their promises no matter what. I stayed with Margaret because I'd promised to, because breaking that promise felt like moral failure, because I thought being good meant honoring commitments even when those commitments were killing you. But here's what nobody tells you: some promises shouldn't be kept. The promise I made to Margaret was made by a 22-year-old boy who didn't know himself yet, who was too afraid to disappoint his parents, who confused obligation with love. That boy made a promise, and the man he became spent a lifetime paying for it. Is that honorable? Or is that just fear pretending to be virtue? Lie number 2, love fades in every marriage. That's just how it works. People told me this constantly. When I hinted carefully, never directly, that something was missing, they'd say, "That's marriage. The spark goes out. You settle into something comfortable." And I believed them. But I've watched other couples, really watched them, couples who've been together 40, 50 years, and some of them still look at each other with light in their eyes, still reach for each other's hands without thinking about it, still laugh together like they're sharing a secret. That wasn't what Margaret and I had. We didn't have a spark that faded. We had a spark that was never really there. Not every marriage loses its love. Sometimes there wasn't enough love to begin with. Lie number 3, you should be grateful for what you have. Gratitude is beautiful. Gratitude is important. But gratitude can also be a cage. Every time I felt the hollow ache of my marriage, I'd tell myself to be grateful. Other people have it worse. Other people would love to have what you have. Who are you to want more? And so I made myself small, made my needs small, made my unhappiness small. But the truth is, wanting more isn't ungrateful. Wanting to feel alive isn't selfish. Wanting love, real love, the kind that makes you feel seen, isn't asking too much. It's asking for what every human being deserves. Lie number 4, it's too late to change. This is the cruelest lie of all. At 30, I thought it was too late. Kids were coming. Too complicated now. At 40, definitely too late. What would people say? At 50, impossible. Too much history. At 60, ridiculous. Who starts over at 60? At 70, I'd given up asking. And then Margaret died, and I was 74 years old, alone for the first time in half a century. And you know what I discovered? It wasn't too late. I had 3 years of freedom. 3 years of waking up and choosing how to spend my days. 3 years of being honest, finally honest about who I was and what I wanted. 3 years. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I wasted 52 years believing it was too late. And I had 3 years of truth that were worth more than all the lies combined. It's not too late for you. It's never too late until it is. You want to know what haunts me? It's not the big moments, not the wedding I shouldn't have gone through with, not the decades of quiet disappointment. It's the small things, the specific things, the moments I can see so clearly they might as well be photographs pinned to the inside of my eyelids. Here's what keeps me up at night, the letter I never sent. 3 months after I married Margaret, I wrote Ruth a letter. Sat at my desk at 2 a.m. and poured out everything. Told her I'd made a mistake, told her I loved her, asked if she'd wait for me while I figured out how to fix what I'd broken. I sealed it, addressed it, walked to the mailbox on the corner, and I couldn't do it. I stood there for 20 minutes, in the cold, holding that envelope. And then I walked back home and burned it in the kitchen sink. I've wondered 1,000 times what would have happened if I'd dropped that letter in the box. Maybe nothing. Maybe Ruth had already moved on. Maybe she would have told me I was a fool. Or maybe everything would have been different. I'll never know, because I was too afraid to find out. The trip to Paris. When I was 45, my company offered me a transfer. 2 years in Paris. Running the European office, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Ruth had moved to Paris. I knew because I'd looked her up. I'm not proud of it, but I did. Checked on her every few years. She'd married a French architect, lived near the Seine. 2 years in the same city. Maybe I would have seen her. Maybe we would have become friends. Maybe nothing would have happened at all. But maybe. That word, maybe. I turned down the transfer, told my boss Margaret didn't want to uproot the children. That was true, but it wasn't the real reason. The real reason was I was terrified. Terrified of what I might do, terrified of what I might feel, terrified of being close to the life I didn't choose. So I stayed in Cleveland, stayed safe, stayed dead. The dance I walked away from. At my daughter's wedding, they played Unforgettable, the Nat King Cole version. That was our song, mine and Ruth's. We used to dance to it in her tiny apartment, swaying in the kitchen while dinner burned on the stove. When that song came on at the wedding, I was standing near the bar. Margaret was across the room talking to her sister, and for one wild moment I thought about finding her, dancing with her, letting myself remember what joy felt like. Instead, I went to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, waited until the song was over. I couldn't even let myself have 3 minutes of memory. The confession I never made. My son David once asked me if I was happy. He was 16. We were driving somewhere, I can't remember where. And out of nowhere he asked, "Dad, are you happy, like really happy?" I should have told him the truth. I should have said, "No, son, I'm not. And I want you to learn from my mistakes. I want you to choose love over safety. I want you to be brave where I was a coward." Instead, I said, "Of course I'm happy. I have everything a man could want." And I watched something close behind his eyes, like he knew I was lying, like he'd learned that day that adults lie about the things that matter most. David is 48 now. He's on his second marriage. The first one was just like mine and Margaret's. He stayed too long with someone he didn't love because he thought that's what good people do. He learned that from me. That's my fault. That's on me. The book I never wrote. When I was young, I wanted to be a writer, had a novel in my head, a love story, believe it or not, about two people who meet at the wrong time and spend their lives wondering what might have been. I told Margaret about it once, early in our marriage. She laughed. Not meanly, just dismissively, said, "That's sweet, but you have a real job now." So I put it away, the story, the dream. The part of me that wanted to create something beautiful. I'm 77 years old. I've never written that book, and now when I try, the words won't come. The story that was so vivid when I was 25 is just fog now. Shapes I can't quite make out, feelings I can't quite remember. I waited too long. The book died inside me, the goodbye I never said. Ruth died 4 years ago. I found out through the internet. An obituary in a French newspaper. I had to use a translation website to read it. She'd lived a full life, traveled the world, wrote poetry, had 3 children who adored her. The obituary said she was full of light until the very end. Full of light. That's who I gave up. I never wrote to her, never called, never told her that she was the great love of my life, even though I only knew her for 1 summer. Now she's gone, and the words I should have said are trapped inside me forever. That's the thing about regrets. They don't fade with time. They fossilize. They become part of your bones. After Margaret died, I did something crazy. At least everyone said it was crazy. I sold the house. The big house in the suburbs with the 4 bedrooms and the manicured lawn and the neighbors who waved but never really talked. I moved into a small apartment downtown, 1 bedroom, big windows, walking distance to coffee shops and bookstores. Margaret would have hated it. I love it. For the first time in 52 years, I'm living in a space that feels like mine. I started taking classes at the community college, creative writing. The thing I gave up all those years ago. I'm the oldest person in every room. The other students call me Grandpa. I don't mind. I'm writing again. Not the novel. That story is gone. But new stories, true stories. Stories about love and loss and the things we trade for safety. I joined a grief support group, not for Margaret. I know that sounds terrible. But the grief I needed to process wasn't for my wife. It was for Ruth, and for the man I could have been, and for all those decades I can never get back. I started saying no. No to obligations that drain me. No to people who want my time but not my truth. No to anything that feels like duty without joy. And I started saying yes. Yes to travel. I finally went to Paris, walked along the Seine, wondered which apartment building Ruth had lived in, ate croissants at a tiny cafe and cried into my coffee and felt more alive than I had in years. Yes to honesty. When people ask how I'm doing, I tell them the truth. I'm grieving a life I didn't live. Most people don't know what to do with that, but some people lean in. Those are my people now. Yes to connection, real connection. I have conversations now that matter, that go deep, that leave me feeling seen. Here's the thing that still amazes me. I'm happier now at 77 with less time ahead than I was at 35, when I thought I had forever. I have 3 years of freedom. That's all. 3 years out of 77. But these 3 years have taught me more about living than the first 74 combined. Now I need to talk to you. Yes, you, the person listening to this right now. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Not out loud, just to yourself. Just in that quiet place where you keep the truths you don't tell anyone. Are you staying somewhere you don't belong? A marriage that feels more like a prison than a partnership. A job that pays the bills but costs you your soul. A life that looks good to everyone except the person living it. Are you staying? And if you are, why? Is it because you love it? Because it brings you joy? because you can't imagine anything better? Or is it because you're afraid? Afraid of disappointing people, afraid of being judged, afraid of the chaos that comes with change, afraid of being alone. I know those fears. I lived inside them for 52 years. And I'm telling you from the other side, from the place where it's almost too late, the thing you're afraid of is not as bad as the thing you're settling for. Loneliness is not as bad as a lifetime with the wrong person. Uncertainty is not as bad as the certainty of regret. Disappointing others is not as bad as betraying yourself. I know what you're thinking, but my situation is different. But I have kids, but I made a commitment. But people are depending on me. I thought all those things too. For 52 years, I thought them. And every one of them was an excuse dressed up as a reason. You can honor your commitments and still be honest about what's not working. You can love your children and still model what a fulfilling life looks like. You can be a good person and still choose yourself. Let me ask you another question. If you died tomorrow, tonight in your sleep, no warning, would you be satisfied with the life you've lived? Not whether your obituary would be impressive, not whether people would say nice things at your funeral. Would you be at peace? If you had 1 minute of clarity right before the end, 1 moment to look back at all your choices, would you nod and say, yes, I did it right, I lived? Or would you think about the letter you never sent, the trip you never took, the words you never said, the love you never let yourself feel? Don't wait until it's too late to answer that question honestly. I'm begging you, don't be me. If I could go back and talk to my 23-year-old self, here's what I would say. Stop. Stop trying to be what everyone else wants you to be. Stop confusing safety with happiness. Stop telling yourself the spark will come later. It won't. Not if it's not there now. Stop performing your life for an audience that isn't even watching. Stop staying out of fear and calling it loyalty. Stop waiting for permission. No one is going to give it to you. You have to give it to yourself. Start. Start listening to that voice inside you, the one that whispers at 2 a.m., the one you've been drowning out for years. That voice knows the truth. Start having the hard conversations, the ones you've been avoiding, the ones that terrify you. They're terrifying because they matter. Start making decisions based on what you want, not what's expected. Start taking the risks, the trip, the career change, the honest conversation, the leap. Start living like time is running out, because it is for all of us. If you're in the wrong relationship, have the conversation. Not tomorrow, not next month. Now. It might not mean leaving. Maybe it means finally being honest, finally saying this isn't working and we need to figure out why. But have the conversation. 52 years of silence is not loyalty, it's cowardice. If you're in the wrong career, start planning your exit today. Not dramatically, not irresponsibly, but intentionally. What would you do if money weren't a factor? What makes you lose track of time? What would you regret never trying? Start moving toward that thing, one step at a time. If you're waiting for the right moment, stop. There is no right moment. There's only now. The right moment is a myth we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of action. It's a way of saying no while pretending we're saying later. Later doesn't exist. There's only now. If you're carrying words you haven't said, say them. Call your father. Tell your mother you love her. Apologize to your sister. Reach out to the friend you've been neglecting. People die, suddenly, without warning, and then the words you meant to say become the regrets that haunt you. Don't let that happen. Say it now, today, before you lose the chance. I'm 77 years old. I've been living honestly for 3 years. 3 years out of 77. Do you understand how absurd that is? I spent 74 years lying to everyone, to myself, about what I wanted, about who I was, about whether I was happy. And then Margaret died and the lie died with her. And I finally started telling the truth. These 3 years have been the best of my life. Not because they've been easy. They haven't. Grief is hard. Loneliness is hard. Looking back at decades of wasted time is hard. But there's a freedom in truth that makes up for all of it. I wake up now and I know who I am. I know what I want. I don't perform for anyone. I don't pretend. I'm too old for pretending. And I'm finally too wise to think it's worth it. Here's the bittersweet part. I would give anything to have those 52 years back, to have been honest at 25 instead of 74, to have chosen love over safety, to have sent that letter, taken that transfer, written that book, to have been brave. But I can't go back. None of us can. What I can do is tell you my story and hope that somewhere in it you see yourself, and hope that seeing yourself makes you brave enough to choose differently. The irony is beautiful and terrible. When you finally understand that time is limited, you start to actually live. You stop wasting the days, you stop postponing the joy, you stop waiting for a someday that never comes. But you only understand that when time is almost gone. I'm trying to save you from that irony. I'm trying to give you at 30 or 40 or 50 what I didn't learn until 74. Time is the only thing you can't get back. Don't waste it being someone you're not. Don't waste it staying somewhere you don't belong. Don't waste it waiting for permission. You have a choice right now, today, this moment. You can keep living the way you're living. Keep staying in the places that don't fit. Keep performing the role everyone expects. Keep telling yourself you'll deal with it later, when the kids are grown, when you have more money, when the time is right. You can choose that. It's the easy choice, the safe choice. It's the choice that will destroy you slowly, from the inside out, until one day you're 77 years old and sitting alone in an apartment talking into a microphone about all the things you wish you'd done differently. Or you can wake up, you can look at your life honestly, really honestly, and ask yourself what's not working. You can have the scary conversation, take the terrifying risk, choose love over safety. You can stop waiting for the life you want and start building it. Today, right now, not tomorrow, not next year, not when you're ready, now, because tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and next year is a fantasy, and you'll never feel ready. Nobody ever does. The only thing you have is this moment. What are you going to do with it? Ruth is gone. Margaret is gone. My chance to live differently is almost gone too, but yours isn't. You still have time, maybe decades of it, years that I would give anything, everything to have back. Don't waste them the way I wasted mine. Be brave, be honest, be yourself. Someday is today. It always has been. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share it. Not for me. I'm 77. I don't need the views or the subscribers. But somewhere out there, someone is making the same mistake I made, staying when they should go, waiting when they should act, lying to themselves the way I lied to myself for 52 years. Maybe this story reaches them. Maybe it changes something. That's why I'm here. That's why I told you all of this. Subscribe if you want to hear more. I have other truths to tell, and I'm not sure how much time I have left to tell them. Leave a comment. Tell me your story. Tell me what you're going to do differently. I read every single one, and I'd love to know that this meant something. Thank you for listening. Your time is precious, the most precious thing you have. Thank you for spending some of it with me. Now go live. Don't wait. Go.